The stadium was packed with families holding flowers, phones, and signs. From where I stood, the crowd looked like a sea of celebration faces glowing under the May sunlight, people shouting names, cameras flashing. I kept scanning the stands, searching for one familiar face. There wasn't one. When the announcer called my name, Marissa Cole, Master of Business Administration, the sound echoed, clear and hollow. The section labeled Reserved for Family stayed empty, rows of gray metal chairs shining under the Sunday. I smiled anyway. Years of military training made it easy to hold my posture, even when everything inside me felt like collapsing. The photographer took a picture. I looked calm. Inside, I just felt stupid for expecting anything else. After the ceremony, I stood near the exit, pretending to check my phone while other graduates hugged their parents, introduced them to professors, cried happy tears. I waited long enough that it became obvious no one was coming. My classmate Ruby waved me over. Her parents insisted on taking a photo with me. I smiled for the camera again, my second fake smile of the day. Ruby asked, "Where's your family? Running late?" I said, "Yeah, probably stuck in traffic," even though I knew they hadn't even tried. I walked alone to the parking lot. Balloons floated past car roofs, horns honked, people laughed. I sat in my beat-up Civic for a long time before turning the key. That silence, the kind that follows a celebration you weren't part of, stayed with me all the way home. Back in my apartment, the graduation cap lay on the counter, untouched since the morning. The sunlight through the blinds hit my framed military photo on the wall, me in uniform at 23, smiling like I had something to prove. That girl thought service guaranteed respect. She thought family was a kind of unbreakable promise. I don't blame her. I used to believe the same thing. 8 years in the Army had trained me to stay composed in chaos. I'd learned how to coordinate convoys in sandstorms, keep calm under pressure, and handle soldiers who cracked halfway through deployment. What I hadn't learned was how to deal with my mother. Linda Cole had a talent for guilt. She didn't yell or curse. She sighed. That slow, quiet sigh that said, "You're disappointing me again." My sister Jenna learned it too. She was 22 now. Blonde highlights, perfect selfies, part-time influencer, full-time favorite. Growing up, I was the provider. They were the dependents. It wasn't said out loud, but everyone knew their roles. When I enlisted, Mom told everyone it was her idea that I joined to help the family. Maybe that was true at first. My checks paid off her credit cards, her car loan, Jenna's private school tuition. Every time I sent money, Mom texted something like, "You're our rock," or "Avery needs piano lessons." I didn't notice the manipulation then. It sounded like gratitude. It wasn't. It was maintenance of control. When I got accepted into the Army scholarship program for grad school, I thought things might change. I was finally doing something for myself. I sent Mom an invite to the ceremony weeks in advance. No reply. I told myself she was busy. Deep down, I knew she just didn't care unless it involved her or Jenna. That night, after the graduation, I made dinner for one microwave lasagna and a beer, the kind of meal that tastes better when no one's there to judge it. I turned on the TV for background noise, half listening to a crime documentary. The narrator said something about trust being the easiest weapon to misuse. It stuck in my head. My phone buzzed with a text. For half a second, I thought it might be Mom, maybe a late congratulations. I was wrong. It was a reminder from my bank about autopay on the loan I'd taken to help Jenna finish college. She dropped out 2 years ago, but the payments were still my responsibility because the account was in my name. That reminder hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just about money, it was the realization that I'd been financing their comfort for nearly a decade without questioning why. I grabbed my old Army duffel bag from the closet and pulled out my medals. They clinked against each other, dull metal sounds in a quiet room. For a second, I felt proud. Then I felt nothing. Those medals meant discipline, duty, honor, but none of that meant anything inside my own family. I took my phone, opened my texts, scrolled through months of messages from Mom. Almost everyone was about money. "Can you cover Jenna's insurance? Need help with rent this month. You'll get it back." I never did. I realized I couldn't even remember the last time she asked if I was okay. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit. Old Army reflexes die hard. The apartment was quiet, peaceful even. But under that peace, something else was forming a kind of cold certainty. I wasn't angry yet. I was just done. I brewed coffee, stood by the window, and looked out at the street below. Neighbors were leaving for work, parents loading kids into cars, dogs barking, regular life. I wanted that kind of ordinary peace more than anything. My phone sat on the counter. No messages, no calls. I stared at it, half expecting something, half hoping for silence. When you spend years saying yes to everyone, silence feels like withdrawal. But there's a point where it becomes relief. That afternoon, Ruby texted me, "Hey, my parents loved you. We're having dinner next week, join us?" I almost said yes, but I didn't. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I finally wanted to be alone on my own terms. I took one last look at the framed graduation photo the school had emailed me earlier that morning. I was smiling in it, holding my diploma like it meant more than it did. Behind me, an empty row of seats glimmered in the sunlight. I thought about cropping that part out before printing it. Then I decided not to. It was honest. It was proof of what I'd already started to accept, that my family could disappear even when I succeeded. That the silence I feared most had already happened. I didn't know it yet, but that empty seat was the start of everything that came next. The next morning, the coffee tasted stronger than usual, maybe because I finally drank it without checking my phone for someone else's needs. Steam rose from the mug, quiet, steady, the only movement in the apartment. I used to hate silence. Now it was starting to feel like proof that no one could reach me without my permission. I opened my laptop to start job applications, but instead found myself scrolling through old photos. Me in uniform, 23 years old, standing in the dust of Afghanistan with a half smile that said, "I've got this." Back then, I believed that being dependable was the highest honor. Turns out, it was also the easiest way to be used. 8 years in the Army taught me a lot about systems, supply chains, order, responsibility, but nothing about boundaries. Out there, people depended on me to deliver what they needed to survive. At home, it wasn't that different. I'd been sending money since my first deployment. The first time, it was for a little help with Mom's car payment. Then for Jenna's school trip. Then for the mortgage. Each time, I told myself it was temporary. But temporary stretched into years. By the time I came back to the States for good, I'd sent home over $60,000. That's a house down payment, or at least a decent start. But to Mom, it was just what families do. Linda Cole wasn't a villain in the movie sense. She didn't scream or threaten. She just had this tone, soft but sharp enough to cut through logic. "You know I'd do the same for you," she'd say, even though she never did. She was the kind of person who made guilt sound like love. Jenna, on the other hand, was the golden child. Pretty, social, good at pretending she had things under control. I used to send her little gifts from overseas: scarves, jewelry, local crafts. She'd thank me once, post it online, and that was it. I was the invisible sponsor behind her lifestyle, the proud sister who existed in the caption but never in the photo. I remember coming home for leave once, about 4 years ago. Jenna had just turned 18. Mom threw a small party at the house. Everyone toasted Jenna's future. No one mentioned that I'd flown 20 hours and driven another 3 just to surprise them. I gave Jenna a bracelet I'd bought in Dubai. She hugged me, whispered, "Thanks," and then said, "Oh, by the way, can you help me with college books? Mom said you might." I helped. Of course I did. Because saying no always came with consequences: a cold shoulder, a guilt trip, or worse, silence so long it made me feel like a stranger in my own family. When I got accepted into the MBA program, Mom didn't ask what it meant to me. She asked if the Army was paying for it. When I said yes, she smiled and said, "Good, then you'll still have money to help out here." That was Linda logic. Every success of mine was just a new way to benefit her. I'd started noticing the pattern more after grad school began. My classmates had group chats full of jokes about parents bragging on Facebook. I didn't have any of that. The last time Mom posted about me, it was to ask if anyone knew good mortgage options for veterans. Not for me, for her. I tried not to think about it much during the semester, but at night, when the assignments were done and the apartment got quiet, it always came back. That nagging thought. Would they even notice if I stopped helping? The answer came on graduation day. I kept replaying that empty seat in my head. The silence of it, the way it said everything they'd never have to say out loud. That's the thing about people who take you don't realize how much until the giving stops. The more I thought about it, the more I saw the pattern everywhere. Even the smallest moments were covered in it. Like when Mom called just before my first deployment, crying that she didn't have enough for rent. I'd wired her money within an hour. She never cried again after that. Not when my unit came under fire, not when I got promoted, not even when I came home injured. Money was her love language. I checked my bank records that morning, just to see. The numbers were brutal. 8 years of transfers labeled things like family support, tuition, miscellaneous. I could track my entire emotional history through those payments. Every time I'd felt guilty, lonely, or proud, I sent money. And every time I did, I bought a few more weeks of peace. Peace had become expensive. I opened my messages again, scrolling through the last conversation with Mom. It was from 2 weeks before graduation. Mom, Jenna needs help covering her rent. Can you send $400? I'll pay you back soon. Me, I'm saving for my move after graduation. Mom, wow, okay. I didn't realize we were keeping score. That was her way of saying, you're selfish. I didn't respond after that. It wasn't worth the fight. The problem was, even silence didn't stop her. When I didn't reply, she'd text Jenna. Jenna would call with that light, sing-song voice. Mom's stressed. Can you just help this once? As if 8 years of this once didn't already exist. That morning, I realized something simple but brutal. My family didn't need me to be happy. They needed me to be available. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by things I'd bought secondhand just to save money for other people. The irony almost made me laugh. I made a decision right there. No more handouts, no more rescues, no more pretending that help wasn't just another form of control. I was done being the safety net for people who never caught me. Still, I couldn't shake one last thought. What happens when you finally stop being useful to the people who depend on you? I didn't know yet, but the answer was already typing its way toward me. The vibration of my phone cut through the quiet like a small explosion. I was halfway through updating my resume when the notification popped up a message from Mom. For a second, my stomach flipped. Some small, ridiculous part of me thought maybe it was a congratulations text, maybe even an apology for missing the graduation. Then I opened it. Need $200 for Jenna's birthday party. Deposit due today. That was it. No, hi, no, congrats. Not even a period at the end. Just numbers and a deadline. The kind of message you send to a bank, not your daughter. I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim, then light up again when my finger brushed it. $2,500 for Jenna's party. The same sister who hadn't bothered to show up for the biggest day of my life. I felt something cold slide through me. Quiet, heavy, final. It wasn't anger exactly, more like exhaustion that had finally hardened into clarity. I'd spent years running on guilt, fueled by the idea that if I gave enough, they'd eventually treat me like family. But that text said everything I needed to know. I opened my banking app, looked at the balance $3,012, enough to cover rent, groceries, and maybe one night out if I felt reckless. I thought about the endless "I'll pay you back" messages that never led anywhere. I thought about every time Mom said, "It's just money, Marissa." I typed back slowly. Sent you something. Check your account. Then I transferred $1. Just one. I added a note. Good luck. The second I hit send, I felt the kind of relief you usually only get after surviving something dangerous. Not joy, not pride, just relief. Like I'd finally stopped trying to swim in quicksand. The next thing I did was open the drawer near my door. Inside was the spare key my mother insisted on keeping, in case of emergencies. I stared at it for a moment, then dropped it into the trash can. That tiny metallic sound, it was quiet, but it echoed in my chest. I searched for a locksmith online and called the first one with good reviews. The guy showed up an hour later, a short, older man with a calm voice and a name tag that said Earl. Breakup? He asked, half joking as he unpacked his tools. Something like that, I said. He nodded like he'd heard it 100 times. Maybe he had. While he worked, the smell of metal filled the hallway. The old lock came off with a soft click, replaced by a new one that felt heavier, stronger. When he was done, Earl handed me 2 shiny keys. There, he said. Fresh start. End of twat. I paid him in cash, thanked him, and stood in the doorway after he left. The apartment was the same as it had been an hour ago, but everything felt different, safer. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play music. I just sat on the couch, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds of traffic outside. For once, the silence didn't bother me. It wasn't empty, it was mine. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter, though the peace didn't last long. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Mom. What is this? $1? Are you joking? Mom, you better not be getting smart with me. Mom, you owe this family more respect. The messages kept coming, one after another, until I turned the phone face down. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I finally didn't owe an explanation. By evening, I'd stopped checking the phone completely. I cooked dinner, cleaned the apartment, and opened my laptop to apply for a few jobs. Every time I hit submit, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. Then came the knock. It was around 8 p.m., 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. My first thought was the landlord, but she always called first. The knocks came again, louder this time. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. 2 uniforms. Police. My stomach dropped. I opened the door cautiously. Evening, one of them said. He was tall, mid-30s, calm voice, name tag reading Henderson. His partner stood slightly behind him, hands folded in front. Miss Cole? Yes. We got a call from your mother. She said she's worried you might be a danger to yourself. You changed your locks, aren't answering calls, and she's concerned for your safety. For a second, I thought he was joking. Then I saw the look on his face, polite professionalism, the kind reserved for calls that might go either way. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it looped back to tragic. You've got to be kidding me, I said quietly. No, ma'am, Officer Henderson said gently. Mind if we step in for a quick welfare check? I let them in. The apartment was spotless coffee mug on the table, open laptop, framed diploma on the wall. Nothing remotely concerning. Do I look unstable to you? I asked. Henderson glanced around, then smiled faintly. Not even close, ma'am. He asked a few standard questions, job status, health, stress. I answered honestly. Just finished grad school. Applying for jobs, no medical issues. Just some family issues. He nodded, typing into his tablet. We'll file this as no concern. If she calls again, just reference this visit. They turned to leave, and just before stepping out, Henderson paused. Sometimes when people start standing up for themselves, others panic. Happens more than you'd think. He closed the door behind him. The lock clicked, solid and clean. I stood there, staring at it, heartbeat thudding in my chest. Not from fear, something else. Fury, maybe. Or realization. My mother hadn't just crossed a line. She'd declared war on it. I sat down on the couch, the quiet pressing in again. The police report email pinged in my inbox a few minutes later. No risk identified. Short, clinical, and yet it felt like validation. Proof that I wasn't the crazy one. I looked around the apartment again. The framed photo, the clean desk, the new lock. Everything in that space was something I'd earned, something I'd protected. And for the first time in years, I knew one thing for sure. If my mother thought guilt would make me crawl back, she was about to learn what silence could do. The sound of the door closing behind those officers stayed in my head long after they left. I sat still for a while, just breathing, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the low buzz of traffic outside. It wasn't fear, it was the kind of quiet fury that comes when you realize someone you trusted is willing to lie just to stay in control. I stared at my phone on the table. Dozens of unread messages from Mom filled the screen, each one angrier than the last. The first few had been all-caps rants about respect and family loyalty. The later ones were shorter, colder. You'll regret this. You're making a mistake. And the final one. You left me no choice. She meant that, literally. The idea that my mother could look at my silence and decide it was a mental health crisis said everything. It wasn't concern, it was punishment. She didn't care whether I was safe. She cared that I stopped being obedient. I spent the rest of that night replaying every conversation I'd had with her over the years. Every time I said no, she found a way to turn it into my fault. Every time I hesitated, she twisted it until I gave in. And the worst part was, I'd let her. The next morning, I woke up early. My brain was still running like I was on deployment alert before dawn, scanning for danger even in the calm. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on job listings. My mind kept wandering back to the knock on the door, the calm tone of the officers, the quiet look of pity when I told them who called. That's when I realized something. I couldn't just ignore her anymore. Ignoring was what gave her room to operate. She'd learned how to weaponize silence long before I did. I checked my voicemail, 2 new ones from her. The first was dramatic sobbing that sounded like it belonged in a bad TV show. The second was calm, too calm. You're forcing me to do things I don't want to do, Marissa. But if you keep acting like this, I will. And a friend. It wasn't a threat in her mind, it was a statement of entitlement. She believed she had the right to manage my life because she'd done it for so long. I deleted both messages and called my bank. I asked to verify my accounts, just to make sure she hadn't tried anything else. The rep on the line walked me through the list of active cards and balances. Everything looked normal, at least for now. Any recent applications or credit inquiries? I asked. Not that I can see, she said, but we recommend checking your credit report for a full picture. I thanked her and hung up. The pit in my stomach didn't go away. It was that same instinct I'd had overseas when something felt wrong even before the radar picked it up. By noon, I'd already gone through my accounts twice. Everything matched. No missing money, no transfers. I was halfway through convincing myself. I was just paranoid when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Mom. It was a notification from Credit Guard. 2 new inquiries. One from Capital One, one from Discover. I hadn't applied for either. I logged into my credit report. My chest tightened. 2 brand new accounts opened last week, both listed under my full legal name, my social security number, and my old family address. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then I saw the transactions. Cherry Creek Event Rentals, DJ Agency, Glam Studio. Every charge screamed one thing: Jenna's birthday. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen, my pulse climbing until I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was theft. I called the number on the statement. The woman on the line asked for verification, her voice professional, detached. When she finally pulled up the account, she said, "This card was opened in person at our Littleton branch last month. Primary applicant, Marissa L. Cole. Co-applicant, Linda M. Cole." I almost dropped the phone. "Can you repeat that?" "Yes, ma'am. It lists both names, with matching identification on file." "How is that possible?" "It's likely the co-applicant presented shared address documents. We'll flag this for fraud investigation immediately. You'll receive forms within 24 hours. The call ended, and I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. My body just shut down for a second. All those years, I thought she was guilt-tripping me because she couldn't manage money. Turns out she never needed me to send cash. She needed my name. When I finally stood up, I didn't feel like the same person who'd opened that text message a few days ago. Something in me had clicked. Something solid, sharp, and unshakable. I opened my voice recorder app. Colorado was a one-party consent state. That meant I could record a call legally without her knowing. I dialed her number. She answered on the 3rd ring. "So, you're alive," she said, the same passive-aggressive tone she always used when pretending to care. "Mom," I said steady. "I found 2 credit cards opened under my name, both using your address. Do you want to explain that?" There was silence for a moment, then a laugh. Not the kind that means something's funny, the kind that buys time. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "I was helping you build credit. You should be thanking me. You'll thank me later." "I lose." "By paying for Jenna's party?" I asked. She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. "It's family money, Marissa. What's yours is ours. I'm tired of you acting like you're above everyone. You think because you wore a uniform and got a degree, you're better than us?" My jaw clenched. "No, I think I'm finally not your personal ATM." Her tone changed, instantly cold, brittle. "You wouldn't dare report your own mother." "I already did." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone still in my hand, the recording app still running, the little red timer blinking steadily. I saved the file, labeled it Boundaries, May 17. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt focused. The army had trained me to follow rules, but it also trained me to fight back when something crossed the line. And this wasn't family drama anymore. This was fraud. I looked around my apartment, the same space where I'd felt alone, abandoned, guilty. Now it looked different. The framed diploma, the new lock, the bank forms I'd printed, proof that I wasn't crazy, that my boundaries weren't cruelty, that doing the right thing sometimes looks like revenge. Outside, the sun dipped behind the Denver skyline. My reflection stared back at me in the window, calm and unshaken. I didn't feel victorious. I felt ready. The email from the bank hit my inbox before sunrise. Subject line, fraud investigation, confirmation needed. I clicked it with the kind of focus I used to have on missions overseas. Heart steady, hands still, breathing slow. The message was short. We've flagged 2 accounts under your name for fraudulent activity. Please confirm details of the co-applicant and recent transactions. I didn't need to read further. I already knew who the co-applicant was. I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open to the online form. Every field I filled felt like an autopsy, methodical, detached, but heavy with the weight of something that used to be alive. Under relationship to suspect, I typed, mother. The word looked wrong in that context, but it was true. When I hit submit, I felt a mix of nausea and clarity. Reporting a stranger for fraud is easy, you're just following rules. Reporting your own mother means you've accepted that she's not who you thought she was. I stared at my reflection in the laptop screen. 8 years in uniform, 2 deployments, a graduate degree, and somehow this was the first battle that made my hands shake. I got up, poured coffee, and leaned against the counter. Outside, Denver was waking up traffic hums, early joggers, sunlight on glass windows. It felt unfair that the world could look so normal while mine was quietly falling apart. My phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. You made a mistake, Marissa. We're family. Fix this before it gets worse. No signature, but I didn't need one. I set the phone down and turned on my voice recorder again, just in case. I'd learned from experience evidence was cleaner than memory. At noon, I called the bank's fraud department to follow up. A woman named Lauren Stein answered. Her tone was professional, but there was something careful in her voice, the kind reserved for people who've already been through enough. We've reviewed the documents you submitted, Miss Cole, she said. We can confirm that the primary applicant was your mother. The signatures match her ID and phone records from her address. I exhaled slowly. So she used my name, my social security number, and forged my signature? Yes, Lauren said. And she presented herself as a co-owner with you. The transactions align with your report, event rentals, catering, and entertainment services for an upcoming party. Upcoming? I asked. Yes, this weekend. Of course. Jenna's party. The one I was supposed to help pay for. Lauren continued. We've escalated the report to our internal legal team. They'll coordinate with local authorities if needed. We'll notify you of updates within 48 hours. Thank you, I said quietly. After hanging up, I sat in silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. I should have felt angry, but what I really felt was done, like there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to fix. Just facts, cold and undeniable. I opened my email again, drafted a new one this time, to my mother. Subject: Fraud report filed. I've confirmed the cards you opened in my name. The bank has started an investigation. Don't contact me again unless it's through a lawyer. I didn't bother with Mom. She'd stopped earning that title a long time ago. I hit send, closed the laptop, and stared at the wall until my coffee went cold. By late afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. Marissa, Mom said, her voice sharp but trembling, like she was trying to sound in control. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. This is going to destroy your sister's birthday. Do you want her to be humiliated? She's not my responsibility. You're heartless, she snapped. After everything I've done for you? I laughed, short and humorless. You mean everything I've done for you? You're twisting things again. Am I? Because the bank has your signature, your address, and your voice on file. That's not twisting, that's evidence. The line went quiet for a few seconds, and then she said something that almost made me pity her. You think they'll believe you over me? You've always been dramatic, Marissa. You've always made me out to be the bad guy. Mom, I said flatly, the difference this time is, the law doesn't care about your version. Her voice broke for just a moment. You wouldn't dare press charges. I don't have to, I said. The bank already did. The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear her breathing quicken on the other end. Then she whispered, You've always been ungrateful. Now, I learned from the best, I said, and hung up. I saved the recording, labeled it fraud call. Evidence 2. The apartment felt colder that evening. Not empty, just still. My laptop pinged again. Another email from the bank confirming receipt of my fraud affidavit. I printed it out, added it to a growing pile on my desk. 1 copy of the police report from the welfare check, 1 copy of the bank letter, and 1 of my grad school diploma. Proof of 3 things: sanity, integrity, and independence. I ate dinner at the table for once, not in front of the TV. Simple meal, chicken and rice, nothing fancy. Each bite felt grounding, like reclaiming a routine that didn't belong to anyone else. By the time the sky turned orange outside, I started to think about how long this had been coming. The signs were there for years, I just didn't want to see them. The way Mom handled money, how she used Jenna as a shield, how family was her favorite excuse. I wasn't angry at Jenna yet. She'd been raised in it, molded by it, but she'd chosen comfort over conscience. And soon, she'd see what loyalty to the wrong person costs. The last thing I did that night was check my door again. The lock gleamed under the hallway light, strong and solid. I turned the key once, just to feel that resistance. Then I set my phone face down and went to bed. No messages, no calls, no guilt. Just the quiet hum of a world that finally wasn't asking anything from me. By the next morning, the anger had cooled into something sharper focus. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was planning. The fraud team said they'd forward my case to their legal branch, but I didn't want to wait for paperwork to catch up. I wanted to face them while the truth was still burning fresh. So I texted my mother, short and simple. Meet me at Granger's Diner. 6 p.m. Bring Jenna and Dad. End quote. No explanations, just an order, the same way she'd always spoken to me. Granger's sat off the highway, one of those old chrome diners that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. I picked it because it was public. Too public for her to perform one of her guilt trip breakdowns. And because the lighting was bright enough that no one could pretend not to see the truth. I got there early and took a booth in the back. The waitress, a woman about my age, dropped off coffee without asking. I nodded my thanks and waited, staring at the reflection of the neon open sign in the window. They showed up 15 minutes late, which was on brand. My mother led the way, sunglasses on even though the sun had already dipped. Dad followed, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. Jenna trailed behind, phone in hand, scrolling even as she walked. Marissa, Mom said, sliding into the booth across from me like we were there for brunch. You really made us drive all the way here for dinner? We're not eating, I said. Dad sat beside her, silent. Jenna didn't even look up until Mom snapped. Put the phone down. The waitress came by, refilled my coffee, and offered them menus. I shook my head. We won't need them. When she left, I reached into my bag and pulled out a brown folder. I slid it across the table. 2 credit cards opened under my name, I said evenly. Capital One and Discover. Both linked to your address. Both used for Jenna's party. Mom's expression didn't move, but her hand twitched just slightly. She gave a little laugh that didn't sound real. Oh, honey, I was helping you. You need credit history. I thought I'd build it up for you. It's not a big deal. Helping? I repeated. You forged my signature. She waved her hand like she was brushing away dust. Don't make this dramatic. It's family. You've always been so ungrateful. Do you think the world doesn't know who paid for your education? I laughed once, sharp enough to make Jenna flinch. You mean me? I paid for it. Every shift, every loan, every dollar I sent while you used my GI Bill refund for Jenna's prom dress. Jenna's thumbs froze over her phone. Mom said you agreed, she mumbled. Mom cut in fast. Enough. You don't talk to your sister that way. I'm not talking to her, I said. I'm talking to you. You used my identity. You called the police on me because I changed my locks. You tried to make me look unstable so you could keep control. That ends today. Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Sweetheart, your mother just got carried away. Let's not blow this up. We can fix it privately. There's no fixing it privately, I said, pushing the folder closer to him. The bank already knows. There's an open investigation. Mom's smile cracked. You did what? I reported it. The accounts are frozen. They have your signature, your phone number, your address. You'll be hearing from them soon. For a few seconds, the whole diner went quiet. Even the clinking of dishes from the kitchen seemed to stop. Mom leaned forward, her voice lowering to a hiss. You'll regret this, Marissa. You're destroying this family over a misunderstanding. No, I said, my tone flat and steady. You destroyed it when you decided my name was worth more to you than my love. Her face hardened. You've always thought you were better than us. The soldier, the scholar, the little hero. You think the law's on your side? Wait until they hear about all the money you gave us. You'll look just as guilty. Good, I said. Then they can see exactly how long I've been paying for this family's mistakes. Dad's hands fidgeted on the table. He wasn't looking at anyone. Jenna just stared at her phone again, pretending to scroll. Mom leaned back and crossed her arms. I gave you life, she said bitterly. And I'm taking mine back, I said. The waitress returned with the check for my coffee. I put down a 10, stood, and looked at them one last time. You'll get your paperwork soon. Don't contact me again. Marissa, Mom snapped, but I didn't turn around. The bell above the diner door jingled as I walked out. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I took a deep breath, not because it felt good, but because it felt final. For once, I didn't owe anyone an answer. I walked to my car and sat there, hands on the steering wheel. My reflection stared back at me in the windshield, steady, quiet, unrecognizable in the best way. I could see them through the window of the diner, still sitting there. Mom was talking fast, hands flying. Jenna looked like she wanted to disappear. Dad just sat there, slumped. That should have made me feel guilty, but it didn't. It just made sense. People like them never see the line until someone drags them across it. When I started the car, the radio came on mid-song, something upbeat and stupidly cheerful. I laughed out loud for the first time in weeks. By the time I got home, the rain had started. I left the lights off, stood by the window, and watched the city blur under the water streaks on the glass. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Jenna. I can't believe you did this. Everyone's talking about it. Mom's freaking out. I typed back one word. Good. Then I turned the phone off and dropped it face down on the counter. For the first time in years, I didn't have to brace myself for what came next. I didn't have to calculate my words or check my tone. The storm could come. I was ready for it. The next few days moved like slow motion, quiet, organized, predictable, the kind of peace that only exists right before everything unravels. I went to work on applications, kept my phone on silent, and stopped checking my messages altogether. Then, on Saturday night, I got an email from the same woman at the bank, Lauren Stein. Miss Cole, the investigation has escalated. We've coordinated with local law enforcement to verify transactions tied to an event this evening at Cherry Creek Banquet Hall. You are not required to attend, but you will receive a formal update after verification. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The timing hit me immediately. Jenna's birthday. The big one Mom was so desperate to throw, the reason she committed fraud in the first place. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere distant. I leaned back in my chair, let the realization sink in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was strangely calm. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. The truth had taken on a life of its own, and it was heading exactly where it belonged. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, the Denver skyline flickering under storm clouds. Somewhere downtown, the party lights were probably glowing, music, cameras, everyone dressed up and pretending the world was perfect. I could almost see it in my head. Mom giving orders, Jenna smiling for videos, everyone performing normal while the ground underneath them started to crack. At 8:45 p.m., my phone buzzed again, unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Miss Cole? A calm voice asked. Yes. This is Officer Henderson, Denver PD. We're on site with representatives from Capital One to verify the fraud report you filed. Everything is being documented as standard procedure. You're not required to attend, but I wanted to confirm the details on record match your report. My voice came out steady. They do. Everything under my name was unauthorized. Understood. We'll finalize the report and include your case number for closure. You'll receive confirmation soon. How is in fact? Thank you, officer. He paused for a moment, his tone softening. Just so you're aware, sometimes justice doesn't look loud. Sometimes it just looks like people running out of lies. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. After the call ended, I stayed seated for a long while, the phone still in my hand. Outside, rain started to fall light at first, then heavier, streaking down the glass. At 9:15, another buzz. This time, a text from Jenna. Are you insane? The police just showed up at my party. The DJ stopped. Everyone's staring. Mom's yelling at them. They're saying your name. What did you do? I stared at the message, the blue bubble glowing against the black screen. Then, I set the phone down and went back to sipping my tea. Across town, the party that was supposed to be the biggest night of Jenna's life was collapsing under the fluorescent light of truth. Later, I saw pieces of it online. Someone had recorded part of it on their phone, a short video already making rounds on local social media. The clip opened with flashing lights and muffled bass. Then, in the corner of the frame, 2 officers walked in, followed by a woman in a gray suit holding a folder. The music cut off mid-beat. Conversations turned into whispers. The woman spoke clearly, her voice carrying over the microphone system. We're here to verify a report of credit card fraud associated with this event. The charges were made using an account under the name Marissa L. Cole. Primary applicant, Linda M. Cole. In the video, you could see Mom freeze beside the cake table floral dress, hair perfect, smile gone. Jenna's eyes widened, the kind of disbelief that doesn't know where to look. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Isn't that her daughter's name?" Mom tried to recover fast. "There must be a mistake," she said, smiling at the officer like charm could rewrite paperwork. But the bank rep flipped open the folder, reading from it calmly. Co-applicant Linda M. Cole. Transactions include event rental, catering, DJ services, floral arrangements, and decoration. The cardholder on file, Marissa Cole, has filed a fraud claim. The room went silent except for the soft buzz of someone's phone recording it all. One officer finally spoke, voice even professional. "We're not here to arrest anyone tonight. This is just verification for the bank's legal process. But we'll need to document receipts and identification before we leave." Someone gasped. The DJ shut off the lights. The pink and gold happy birthday banner drooped in the humidity. Guests started whispering, gathering purses, pretending to check their phones as they left. Jenna stood in the middle of it all, mascara streaking down her face, muttering something to Mom that the mic didn't catch. But I could guess. Mom's face was pale under the spotlights. She was still talking, her mouth moving fast, hands gesturing, eyes darting toward the exits like she could find a way out. She didn't realize yet that there wasn't one. Not this time. Back in my apartment, I didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't celebrate. I just sat there, letting the rain drown out the noise. Justice wasn't supposed to feel good. It was supposed to feel real. The next morning, I woke up to a new wave of messages. Screenshots, links, forwarded posts. The clip from the party had already gone semi-viral, 500,000 views overnight. Captions like, "Sweet 22 turned sour, fraud scandal at Denver party." I scrolled through a few comments. The daughter reported her own mom? Damn. Good for her. Imagine being that mom. People online always move fast. But for once, the narrative didn't twist. For once, the truth stood on its own. At 10 a.m., an email arrived from Capital One's fraud division. Investigation resolved. Primary applicant, Linda M. Cole, has acknowledged unauthorized use and agreed to full repayment of $8,412. Case closed. No apology, no drama, just the truth in black and white. I printed it, slipped it into the folder with my other documents, and pinned a copy to my wall beside my framed diploma and the locksmith's receipt. 3 documents that told the whole story. Effort, protection, freedom. Then I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, black coffee. I opened the window to let the rain-soaked air in. Denver smelled clean, washed out, quiet. For years, I'd thought silence meant weakness, that quiet meant surrender. But as the light filled the apartment, I realized I'd been wrong. Silence wasn't weakness. It was victory. By Monday morning, my mother's name was floating around town like a warning label. Littleton wasn't a big place. Bad news there spread faster than power outages. I didn't have to tell anyone what happened. The whispers did the work for me. At the grocery store, people probably lowered their voices when they saw her. At church, they probably avoided her row. I didn't enjoy any of that, but I didn't feel sorry either. Actions have weight, and she'd been throwing hers around for years. I woke up to a new email from the bank, this time officially closing the case. The line that mattered most read, "Primary applicant Linda M. Cole has admitted unauthorized use and agreed to repay $8,412 in full." End quote. No emotion, no apology, just acknowledgement, the kind of sentence that ends an era. I printed it out and added it to the collection on my wall. My diploma, the locksmith's receipt, the fraud resolution letter. Together they told one story. I earned everything, I protected it, and I survived. Downstairs, the apartment smelled like coffee and rain. The radio played some upbeat pop song I didn't know. The world had moved on like it always does. But this time, I wasn't lagging behind it. By noon, Jenna finally texted. Her messages came in bursts, like she couldn't decide between anger and guilt. Mom's losing it. She won't stop crying. Dad says she's not leaving the house. People at church are talking. You didn't have to ruin her life over money. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "It wasn't about money." And that was all I sent, because it wasn't. It was about truth and control and finally drawing a line that couldn't be erased. I didn't hear back after that. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the post office to close my old forwarding address, the one that used to link to my parents' house. The clerk recognized my last name. She hesitated before handing over the form. "Cole, you're not related to that family out in Littleton, are you?" I smiled politely. "Not anymore." The woman blinked, nodded, and didn't ask anything else. Outside, the sky had cleared. I walked to my car, passing a couple of people whispering near the parking lot. For a second, I wondered if they recognized me too. Then I realized I didn't care. When I got home, I found a voicemail waiting on my phone. It was Dad. His voice was calm but small, the same way he'd sounded at the diner. "Marissa, your mom's. She's having a hard time. She didn't think it'd go this far. Maybe just talk to her. Try to make this right. Family's family." I deleted the message halfway through. Family's family was the line they always used right before asking for something. It used to work. It didn't anymore. That evening, I ordered Thai food and opened a beer. The simplest meal I'd had in months somehow tasted like a celebration. I ate while watching the local news scroll quietly on the TV. I didn't expect to see anything, but there it was, a quick segment about a local fraud case resolved after viral video surfaces. They didn't name anyone, but they didn't need to. The footage they used was from outside the banquet hall. The flashing lights, people leaving, the broken banner. It was surreal, seeing the whole thing compressed into a 30-second clip that ended with the anchor saying, "Sometimes justice happens quietly." Quietly. The word made me smile. For years, everything in my life had been loud orders, expectations, guilt. The quiet used to scare me because it meant no one needed me. Now it just meant I was finally free. The next day, I got another email, this one from a recruiter at a security consulting firm I'd applied 2 weeks earlier. They wanted to schedule an interview. I accepted immediately. It felt like something new was starting, something that belonged entirely to me. While I prepped for the interview, I found myself glancing at that wall again. The diploma, the letter, the lock receipt, the 3 proofs of survival. They weren't trophies. They were reminders. I'd worked, I'd endured, I'd protected myself when no one else did. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I froze for a second before checking the peephole delivery driver. My order of replacement credit cards had arrived. I signed for them, thanked the guy, and went back inside. For a moment, I just held the envelope, thumb tracing my name printed clean and crisp. My name, not my mother's, not tied to anyone else's address, just mine. It was strange how something as small as a plastic card could feel like a declaration of independence. I spent the rest of the evening cleaning the apartment. Not because it was messy, but because I wanted everything in order. Every drawer, every document, every piece of my life exactly where it belonged. The Army had drilled discipline into me, but this time it wasn't about control, it was about peace. By the time the sun went down, Denver's skyline was glowing again. I made a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching headlights move across wet streets. Somewhere I imagined Mom sitting in her living room, curtains drawn, phone silent, the weight of her choices finally catching up. Maybe someday she'd understand that this wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. The next morning, I woke up early again. Old habits, maybe. The air was cool, the kind that feels like a reset button. I opened the window, breathed in, and felt something I hadn't in a long time: calm. I made breakfast, ironed my clothes for the interview, and set my phone on the counter. No new messages, just the empty space where chaos used to live. Before heading out, I glanced once more at the papers on the wall. 3 documents, perfectly aligned. I added one more pushpin and hung the email printout from Capital One right below them. Then I stepped back and looked at the collection as a whole: effort, protection, freedom, and proof. Proof that silence can build something stronger than shouting ever could. Proof that walking away isn't losing, it's reclaiming. I locked the door behind me, slipped my new key into my pocket, and headed out into the bright morning air. The job interview at Aegis Security Consulting happened on a crisp fall morning, Denver, glowing in that muted gold light that makes the city look cleaner than it really is. I parked my car early, sat for a moment, and adjusted my uniform blazer. It wasn't a military uniform, but it still felt like armor. The office was sleek and quiet, all glass and gray. A woman named Hannah met me in the lobby. She shook my hand, smiled, and said, "You must be Marissa. We read your application, Army Logistics, Data Systems, MBA. That's a rare mix." "Guess I like order," I said. The interview went fast. 3 managers, 1 HR rep, and questions that felt more like conversations. We talked about risk assessments, crisis response, and leadership under pressure. I didn't use big words or war stories. I just told the truth, that I'd learned how to stay calm when everything fell apart, and that I wasn't afraid of cleaning up other people's messes. They offered me the job 2 days later. The moment I got the email, I didn't cheer, didn't call anyone. I just sat in silence and let the relief sink in. For once, my success didn't need an audience. My first day at Aegis felt strange, in a good way. The team was small, practical, no office politics. They respected structure but didn't worship it. My supervisor, a retired Marine named Blake, welcomed me with a firm handshake. "We like people who don't need babysitting," he said. "Good," I told him. "I'm not good at being babysat." The rhythm of work came naturally: planning, analyzing, anticipating, the same skills I'd used in the Army, just with fewer explosions. But the best part wasn't the job. It was the quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you're no longer waiting for your phone to light up with someone else's crisis. One afternoon, a younger analyst named Eric asked me about my time in the military. "You must have seen some wild stuff," he said. "Wild, yes," I answered. "But the hardest fights aren't always overseas." He laughed, not realizing how literal I meant it. A few weeks later, during a team training, Blake asked everyone to share one lesson from a past challenge. When it was my turn, I said, "Never confuse loyalty with obligation. One earns trust, the other drains it." The room went quiet for a second before Blake nodded. "That'll stick with me," he said. Outside of work, life started to look normal. I joined a gym, got coffee with coworkers, even signed up for a weekend hiking group. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. That was new for me: stability without guilt. 6 months after the party incident, I got a new apartment, closer to downtown. Bigger kitchen, better view, brighter mornings. On my first night there, I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. Clothes, books, medals. Then, from the last box, the old lock I'd replaced months ago. The metal had dulled with time, but it was still solid. I placed it on the shelf beside my framed diploma and the fraud letter. It looked out of place, but right at home, like a relic of an old war I'd survived. The next morning, I came into work early. Blake was in the conference room, running drills with a few new hires. One of them, a tall kid with too much nervous energy, looked at me and asked, "You ever get scared? Like, of anything?" I smiled. I used to. Mostly of people I loved. He blinked, confused, and Blake chuckled. "You'll understand that line one day, kid." At lunch, I sat outside on the patio, eating in silence while the city buzzed below. A breeze carried that faint metallic smell of autumn cold air and dry leaves. I checked my phone out of habit. Nah new messages. Nah missed calls. Nah demands. Freedom, I realized, doesn't announce itself. It just stops asking for permission. That night, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The streets were quiet except for the occasional passing car. The world felt open again, like it had finally handed me the reins back. I stopped by a hardware store before heading home. The clerk asked if I needed help. I told him I wanted a shadow box frame, the kind used for displaying keepsakes. At home, I placed 3 things inside it: my old army badge, the locksmith's receipt, and the metal lock. I hung it right above my desk, next to my framed diploma. The combination looked strange but balanced. Duty, boundaries, identity, all in one line. I didn't need anyone else to see it. It wasn't for display. It was a reminder. Around midnight, I made tea and stood by the window. The city lights shimmered through the fog, distant and calm. Somewhere out there, Mom and Jenna were still living their lives. I didn't know how, and I didn't need to. Mom's restitution payments were being processed automatically, and legally, she couldn't contact me anymore. It was funny how peace sometimes came wrapped in paperwork. A week later, Blake asked if I'd consider leading a training module for new recruits. "You've got the kind of calm they don't teach," he said. I agreed. The next morning, standing in front of the group, I looked at their faces, young, eager, uncertain, and said, "Most people think control comes from holding on. It doesn't. It comes from knowing when to let go." They nodded, pretending to get it. Maybe one day they would. When the session ended, Eric caught up to me in the hallway. "You ever think about going back to the army?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "No, I already served my time." That night, after work, I sat at my desk again. The shadow box on the wall caught the warm light from the lamp. The lock gleamed faintly, like it still remembered its purpose. I leaned back in my chair, sipped my tea, and thought about the girl who once waited at her own graduation for people who never showed up. She'd been desperate for approval back then. Now, she wouldn't even open the door for it. In a way, it felt like I'd finally come home, not to a place, but to a version of myself I hadn't met yet. One who didn't apologize for closing doors that needed to stay shut. The rain started again, light against the window. I let it play in the background, steady and familiar, while I sat in the quiet, knowing I'd already fought my last family war. The first snow of the season came early that year. I woke up to a city painted white, streets hushed, traffic slower than usual. From my window, Denver looked peaceful, almost like a photograph. For the first time in a long time, that peace didn't feel temporary, it just felt earned. The kettle whistled behind me. I poured hot water into my mug, the smell of peppermint filling the room. On the counter, my laptop blinked with new notifications, but I ignored them for now. Some things could wait. I sat by the window, holding the mug between my hands, watching flakes fall past the glass. The sound of the radiator, the faint hum of the fridge, the muffled world outside it, all blended into something quiet and steady. That quiet used to scare me. It used to mean I was alone. Now it meant I was free. When I finally opened my laptop, there it was, a new email alert from my credit monitoring service. The subject line read, "New credit inquiry attempt, denied." I read it once, then again, just to be sure. Someone had tried to open a new card under my name. The system flagged it and shut it down before it could process. I didn't need to guess who it was. For a second, I felt that old flash of irritation, the reflex to respond, to fight back, to call and demand an explanation. Then I exhaled, slow and deliberate. Instead of reacting, I clicked delete. No panic, no calls, no anger, just deletion. That was the difference. Now I didn't need to win arguments anymore. I'd already won the war. Later that morning, I walked to the office through the thin layer of snow. The city was quieter than usual, everyone careful with their steps. The air bit at my face, clean and sharp. At work, the team was decorating for the holidays, paper snowflakes taped to monitors, cheap tinsel drooping over cubicle walls. Eric waved me over. "Hey, boss," he said with a grin. "Blake wants us to run a scenario later risk assessment for corporate fraud. Guess who I thought of?" I smirked. "I've got experience." He laughed, not knowing how literal that was. At noon, I stepped into the break room for coffee. The machine was sputtering like it was fighting for its life, but the smell was good enough. Blake walked in behind me, poured his own cup, and nodded toward my desk. "Saw the commendation email," he said. "Good work on that security audit." "Thanks," I said. "Just doing the job." He leaned against the counter. "That's what I like about you, Cole. You don't chase credit, you just fix things quietly and move on." I smiled at that. It was the best compliment I could have gotten. The day passed smoothly. No drama, no sudden calls, no fire to put out. Around 5, I packed up and left, slipping into the early dusk where the streetlights glowed through the snow. On the way home, I passed a cafe I used to go to during grad school. I stopped for a minute, staring through the window at students hunched over laptops, half asleep on caffeine and ambition. I remembered how I used to sit there, scrolling through messages from Mom, trying to decide how much I could send her without overdrafting my account. I kept walking. The past didn't sting anymore, it just sat behind me, smaller with every step. At home, I cooked dinner: salmon, rice, roasted vegetables. Simple, clean, quiet. I ate while the city lights flickered outside. After cleaning up, I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out that same old folder, the one with all the papers that had once felt like my life's wreckage. I flipped through it one more time. The fraud letter, the locksmith's receipt, the graduation photo with the empty seats in the background. They didn't hurt anymore. They just told the truth. I slipped them all back into the folder and set it on the shelf. Then I looked up at the wall above my desk. My framed diploma, my job ID badge, and the shadow box holding my old army badge and the lock. 3 pieces of my life, side-by-side: duty, survival, and freedom. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. The snow outside kept falling, soft and endless. I turned off the lights and sat back down, the apartment dim except for the glow of the street lamp outside. I thought about everything that had happened the years of giving. The guilt, the manipulation, the endless cycle of "you owe us." It all felt distant now, like watching someone else's movie. For years, I thought silence was what weakness sounded like. I used to fill it with explanations, apologies, justifications. Now I knew better. Silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. It was control. It was peace. My phone vibrated once on the table. A new message from an unknown number. I didn't open it. I deleted it without reading and powered the phone off. I'd learned that not every door needs to be answered, not every noise deserves attention, and not every family deserves forgiveness. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance, fading as it turned a corner. Somewhere, the city kept moving people, arguing, laughing, living. I didn't need to join the noise. I'd already found my quiet. I poured another cup of tea, leaned back in my chair, and let the steam warm my hands. The room felt perfectly still, the kind of stillness that doesn't demand anything. I looked once more at the wall, the 3 framed symbols of a life rebuilt. Then I whispered to myself, not for comfort, but for confirmation. I did it right this time. The radiator hummed softly. The snow thickened outside, turning the city's chaos into calm. And in that silence, the kind I used to dread, I realized I wasn't waiting for anyone, wasn't expecting anything, wasn't fighting anymore. The war was over, and the quiet was mine to keep.